At 10:42 a.m. on December 1st, 1944, Lieutenant Alfred Rose climbed into the turret of an M36 Jackson tank destroyer positioned on high ground northeast of Beeck, Germany, familiarizing himself with controls he barely understood while German armor prowled the countryside 2 miles away. 26 years old, 3 weeks with the 814th Tank Destroyer Battalion, 0 confirmed kills. The Germans had deployed elements of the 5th Panzer Army across the Rhineland, including at least 40 Panther tanks whose frontal armor could deflect American rounds from 800 yards. Rose's battalion had lost 11 tank destroyers in November, 17 crewmen dead. The pattern was always the same. German gunners spotted American positions first, fired first. American crews died before they understood what hit them. The M10 Wolverine tank destroyers they'd been using couldn't penetrate Panther armor beyond 500 yards. By the time American crews got close enough for a kill shot, German 88mm guns had already turned their vehicles into burning coffins. The Army's solution arrived in September, the M36 Jackson, 90mm main gun, based on the Sherman chassis but mounting the most powerful American tank gun in Europe. It could penetrate 5.6 inches of armor at 1,500 yards. On paper, it was the answer to the Panther problem. In reality, Rose had fired exactly 4 training rounds through the gun. He didn't know the reticle markings, didn't know the ranging system, didn't know if the telescopic sights adjustments matched the technical manual or some field modification nobody had documented. His commander had told him to learn the system, fast. The battalion was being repositioned to support Operation Clipper, the push to clear German forces from the Siegfried Line fortifications around Geilenkirchen. Intelligence reported German armor counterattacking along the entire sector. Panthers, Tiger tanks, self-propelled guns, the kind of targets that required gunners who knew their equipment cold. Rose studied the M76F telescopic sight mounted in front of the gunner's position. The reticle showed range markings in 100-yard increments. The longest marking read 4,600 yards, maximum effective range, 2.61 miles. He'd never heard of anyone engaging armor at that distance. Tank battles happened at 500 yards, maybe 1,000 if you had good terrain. Anything beyond that was artillery work. If you want to see how Rose's crash course in the M36's systems turned out, please hit that like button. It helps us share more forgotten stories from the Second World War. Subscribe if you haven't already. Back to Rose. The Jackson's turret was cramped. Loader to his left, commander above and behind, assistant driver and driver down in the hull. Rose traced his hands over the traverse controls, the elevation wheel, the firing mechanism. Everything felt foreign. 3 weeks wasn't enough time to develop the muscle memory that kept gunners alive. He needed months. He had hours. The high ground northeast of Beeck offered clear sight lines across the German countryside. Open fields, scattered tree lines, a highway running roughly parallel to their position. Good terrain for spotting targets. Also good terrain for being spotted. German forward observers had been calling in artillery all week. The battalion had learned to stay dispersed, never clustering more than 2 vehicles together. Rose pressed his face against the rubber eyepiece of the M76F sight. The optics were clean. Magnification was decent. He practiced tracking across the horizon, getting used to how the reticle moved as he adjusted elevation. The range markings were precise. 400, 800, 1200. All the way out to that final marking at 4,600 yards. At 11:15, movement caught his eye at the absolute edge of the sight picture. Something dark, angular, moving slowly across his field of view at a distance that seemed impossible for direct fire engagement. The target was moving left to right across Rose's field of view at what he estimated was extreme range. Through the M76F telescopic sight, the shape resolved into the distinctive silhouette of a German Panther tank. Low profile, long gun barrel, the characteristic sloped armor that made frontal penetration nearly impossible. It was traveling along what appeared to be a road or highway, moving at perhaps 6 to 8 miles per hour. Rose's first instinct was to report the sighting and let someone else deal with it. The range had to be over 2 miles. Nobody engaged tanks at 2 miles. The ballistic drop alone would send rounds sailing over the target or burying into the ground hundreds of yards short. The crosswind would push projectiles off course. The margin for error at that distance was measured in fractions of a degree. But the Panther wasn't zigzagging. wasn't taking evasive action. It was moving in a straight line along that distant road, completely unaware that an American tank destroyer was tracking it from high ground 2.5 miles away. The kind of target that appeared once in a war if you were lucky. The kind Rose had exactly zero experience engaging. He checked the reticle again. The M76F sight had been designed for the 90mm gun specifically. The range markings weren't arbitrary. They'd been calculated based on the gun's muzzle velocity, the standard armor-piercing round's ballistic coefficient, and typical engagement conditions. The engineers who designed this sight had included that 4,600-yard marking for a reason. They believed the gun could reach that far. Whether it could hit anything at that distance was a different question. Rose began calculating. The Panther was moving perpendicular to his position. That meant he'd need to lead the target. At 2.5 miles, the round would take several seconds to reach impact. During that time, the Panther would continue moving. He'd need to aim ahead of the tank by dozens of yards, maybe more. The exact calculation required knowing the precise range, the exact speed of the target, and the flight time of the projectile. He had none of those numbers with certainty. The M36 Jackson carried two types of main gun ammunition. The M82 armor-piercing capped round was designed for penetrating armor. It had a large explosive filler that detonated after penetration, maximizing internal damage. At 500 yards, it could punch through 5.1 inches of armor. At 1,000 yards, 4.8 inches. At 4,600 yards, the penetration tables in the technical manual simply stopped listing values. The assumption was that nobody would attempt shots at that range. Rose understood the physics. Every yard of distance meant more velocity loss, more drop, more wind drift. By the time an M82 round traveled 4,600 yards, it would have lost significant kinetic energy. It might not penetrate the Panther's frontal armor even if it hit. But the Panther's side armor was a different story. 40 to 50 millimeters thick, 1.6 to 2 inches. Vulnerable to the 90mm gun even at extended range. The target continued its steady movement across the distant highway. Rose made a decision that violated every principle of tank destroyer doctrine he'd been taught. He was going to attempt the shot. Not because he thought it would work, but because this was the only way to learn if the M36's systems could actually perform at their theoretical maximum range. His hand moved to the traverse control. He began tracking the Panther, keeping it centered in the reticle while his mind raced through the variables he'd need to account for. Rose called out the sighting to his commander without taking his eye from the telescopic sight. Panther, extreme range, moving lateral. The commander climbed up beside him, looked through his own optics, and went silent for 5 seconds. When he spoke, his response was simple. Rose's call, Rose's shot. The loader already had an M82 armor-piercing round chambered. Standard procedure. Tank destroyers kept AP rounds loaded at all times when in combat zones. Rose focused on the ranging problem. The M76F sight showed distance markings, but estimating range to a moving target at 2.5 miles required more than eyeballing the reticle. He needed to bracket the target with ranging shots. Ranging fire was standard practice for artillery. Shoot short, shoot long. Walk the rounds onto target until you found the correct elevation and lead. For a tank destroyer engaging armor at 400 yards, ranging fire was suicide. It gave away your position, gave the enemy time to return fire or maneuver. But at 4,600 yards, the Panther crew wouldn't hear the shots, wouldn't see the muzzle flash, wouldn't know they were being engaged until rounds started impacting near their position. Rose set the elevation for what he estimated was 4,000 yards, short of where he believed the target actually was. He wanted to see where the round impacted so he could adjust. The traverse controls allowed him to track the Panther's movement. The tank was maintaining steady speed along that distant highway. Rose led the target by approximately 50 yards, his best guess at compensating for the Panther's forward movement during the projectile's flight time. He pressed the firing trigger. The 90mm gun's recoil rocked the entire turret. The muzzle blast was tremendous, even with the double baffle muzzle brake the Army had started installing in November. Smoke and dust obscured the sight picture for 2 seconds. When it cleared, Rose kept his eye pressed to the optic, watching for impact. At 4,000 yards, the time of flight was approximately 6 seconds. Rose counted. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Nothing visible. The distance was too great to see the actual impact through the telescopic sight. He'd need to fire again and watch for dust clouds or ground disturbance that might indicate where the round landed. He adjusted elevation upward, added another 100 yards to his estimate. The Panther was still moving along the highway, apparently unaware that someone was shooting at it from a distance that exceeded normal tank engagement ranges by a factor of 4. Rose led the target again, this time by 60 yards to account for increased flight time at the longer range. Second shot. The gun fired. Recoil. Smoke. Rose kept the sight trained on the area where he expected impact. 6 seconds of flight time, maybe 7 at this range. He counted again while keeping the Panther centered in his field of view. The target continued its steady movement. No indication it was taking evasive action. No indication its crew had spotted the American position on the high ground northeast of Beeck. Then, Rose saw it. A small dust cloud erupting on the highway surface, approximately 20 yards short of the Panther's position. The round had impacted close. Very close. Close enough that Rose now had solid data for his final adjustment. He knew the range. He knew the lead. He knew the ballistic drop. He made one final elevation correction, added 10 yards to his lead calculation to account for the Panther's continued forward movement, set the range marking on the reticle to exactly 4,600 yards, the maximum marking on the M36F telescopic sight. He waited for the Panther to move into the precise position where his calculations said the round would intercept the target's path. The moment arrived. Rose fired the third shot. The 90mm round covered 4,600 yards in approximately 7 seconds. Rose kept the Panther centered in his telescopic sight, watching for impact. The M82 armor-piercing projectile was traveling at roughly 1,500 feet per second when it left the muzzle. By the time it reached maximum range, velocity had dropped significantly. But physics favored Rose in one critical way. The Panther's side armor was only 40 to 50 millimeters thick. Even a depleted 90mm round retained enough kinetic energy to penetrate that. The hit was visible through the M76F sight as a bright flash on the Panther's left side hull. Rose had led the target perfectly. The round struck the tank just behind the front road wheel, precisely where the side armor was thinnest and where the ammunition storage bins were located. The impact was followed immediately by a larger secondary explosion. The Panther's own 79 rounds of 75mm ammunition detonating inside the fighting compartment. The German tank lurched to a stop. Smoke began pouring from the turret hatches. The crew would be dead or dying. A direct penetration into the ammunition storage area at that location meant catastrophic internal damage. The blast would have killed the loader instantly. The pressure wave would have incapacitated everyone else in the turret. Even if some crew members survived the initial explosion, they had seconds to evacuate before the fire reached the fuel tanks. Rose didn't stop shooting. Standard procedure for tank destroyer crews was to continue engaging until the target was confirmed destroyed. A stopped tank wasn't necessarily a dead tank. German crews were trained to play dead, waiting for American units to move past before restarting their vehicles and attacking from behind. Rose had heard stories from other battalions about Panthers that had taken multiple hits, appeared knocked out, then returned to action 30 minutes later after crews made field repairs. He reloaded with another M82 armor-piercing round and fired again. Fourth shot, same point of aim. The round impacted the Panther's hull near the original penetration point. By now, the internal fire was spreading. The fifth shot used high explosive instead of armor-piercing. HE rounds were devastating against stopped vehicles. The explosion ripped away external components and ensured the fire would consume everything inside the tank. Rose fired a sixth round, then a seventh. He kept shooting until flames were visibly erupting from every hatch and vision port on the Panther. The thick black smoke, characteristic of burning diesel fuel, rose from the wreck in a column that would be visible for miles. There was no possibility of that crew surviving. No possibility of that tank returning to service. The engagement had lasted approximately 2 minutes from first shot to confirmed kill. Rose had expended 7 90mm rounds, 3 for ranging, 4 to ensure destruction. The range was 4,600 yards, 2.61 miles, the maximum effective range of the M76F telescopic sight mounted in the M36 Jackson. When Rose finally pulled back from the sight, his hands were shaking, not from fear, from the realization of what he just accomplished. He destroyed a Panther tank at a range that exceeded every engagement distance he'd ever heard of in armored warfare. The shot would go into the 814th Tank Destroyer Battalion's after-action report. It would be witnessed and verified by his commander and the other crew members in the Jackson. It would become part of the official record. What Rose didn't know was that his confirmed kill at 4,600 yards would remain the second longest tank versus tank engagement in military history for the next 47 years, only 500 yards short of a record that wouldn't be broken until a British Challenger tank made an impossible shot during the Gulf War in 1991. The burning Panther remained visible on the distant highway for the next 30 minutes. Other American units in the sector reported the smoke column. Forward observers tried to determine if it was a knocked-out German vehicle or a destroyed American position. The 814th Tank Destroyer Battalion's operations officer eventually confirmed the kill through map coordinates and timeline correlation. Rose's position on the high ground northeast of Beeck aligned perfectly with the sight lines to the burning wreck. By 1300 hours, word of the shot had spread through the battalion. A lieutenant nobody had heard of 3 weeks ago had just made the longest confirmed tank destroyer kill in the European theater. Crews from other M36 Jacksons started asking questions. What range marking did he use? How many ranging shots? What was the lead calculation? Rose didn't have clean answers. He'd fired by instinct and physics, not by some repeatable formula other gunners could memorize. The M36 Jackson had only been in combat since September, 4 months of service. American tank destroyer battalions had spent most of 1944 fighting with the M10 Wolverine, a vehicle whose 3-inch gun couldn't reliably penetrate German heavy armor beyond 600 yards. The M18 Hellcat was faster, but carried the same underpowered gun. When Panthers and Tigers started appearing in large numbers during the Normandy campaign, American crews found themselves outgunned at every engagement range. The 90mm gun changed that calculation. It was adapted from anti-aircraft artillery, a weapon designed to reach bombers at 15,000 feet altitude. Mounting that gun in a mobile turret on a Sherman-based chassis gave American forces their first vehicle capable of engaging German heavy armor on equal terms. The M36 could penetrate Panther frontal armor at 1,000 yards. It could destroy Tigers at ranges where the Tiger's 88mm gun struggled to penetrate the M36's frontal slope. But the weapon's true capability extended far beyond normal engagement distances. The 90mm M3 gun had a muzzle velocity of 2,700 feet per second. The M82 armor-piercing round weighed 24 pounds. Basic physics said that combination could reach targets at 4,000 yards or more. The question wasn't whether the gun could shoot that far. The question was whether anyone could aim accurately enough to hit a moving tank at that distance. Rose had answered that question. Not through superior training, not through months of practice, through 2 ranging shots that gave him the data he needed to make the 3rd shot count. The engagement demonstrated something the Army's Ordnance Department had suspected but never confirmed in combat. The M76F telescopic sight's maximum range marking of 4,600 yards wasn't theoretical. It was functional. German forces in the sector continued operating Panthers throughout December. Rose's battalion encountered them regularly during the push toward the Roer River, but none of those engagements happened at extreme range. German crews had learned from 2 years of fighting on the Eastern Front. They used terrain. They avoided open ground. They positioned their tanks in covered positions where American forces would have to close to within 500 yards to get clear shots. The conditions that allowed Rose's shot were unique. High ground providing elevation advantage, open terrain with clear sight lines, a German crew moving along an exposed highway without taking tactical precautions, and a gunner who was willing to attempt something that doctrine said was impossible. Those conditions wouldn't repeat themselves for the rest of the war. By mid-December, the German counteroffensive in the Ardennes pulled most American armored units away from the Ruhr sector. The 814th Tank Destroyer Battalion redeployed to support operations against the Bulge. Rose would fire his M36's 90mm gun many more times before Germany surrendered in May, but he would never again attempt a shot at 4,600 yards. The Battle of the Bulge began 16 days after Rose's record shot. On December 16th, German forces launched their massive counteroffensive through the Ardennes forest. 3 entire armies, 200,000 troops, 600 tanks, including the newest Panthers and King Tigers. The offensive caught American forces completely off guard. Within 48 hours, German armored spearheads had penetrated 30 miles into Allied lines. The 814th Tank Destroyer Battalion received emergency orders on December 18th. Redeploy south immediately. Support the 7th Armored Division at Sankt Vith. The town was a critical road junction. If German forces captured it, they would have direct access to the Meuse River crossings. The entire northern shoulder of the American defensive line would collapse. Rose's company moved through Belgium in darkness. The roads were chaos. Supply trucks heading west, away from the German advance. Infantry units trying to reach defensive positions. Artillery batteries repositioning under fire. The 814th arrived at Sankt Vith on December 19th and immediately went into action. German Panther battalions were already engaging American positions on the eastern approaches to the town. The fighting around Sankt Vith bore no resemblance to Rose's long-range engagement at Beeck. This was close-quarters armor combat. Panthers appearing from tree lines at 300 yards. American tank destroyers firing from behind burning buildings. German infantry with Panzerfausts hunting M36s through village streets. The kind of fighting where the side that spotted first won, where hesitation measured in seconds meant death. Rose's Jackson took up position on the southern edge of Sankt Vith on December 20th. His field of fire covered a road junction where German armor was expected to attack. The range was 800 yards. Standard engagement distance, no exotic calculations required. Just point the 90mm gun at center mass and shoot when targets appeared. The attack came at dawn on December 21st. 4 Panthers supported by 2 companies of Panzer Grenadiers. Rose's company knocked out 2 Panthers in the first minute of fighting. German return fire destroyed 1 M36 and damaged 2 others. The engagement lasted 14 minutes. When it ended, all 4 German tanks were burning and the infantry had withdrawn. American casualties were 3 tank destroyers destroyed, 11 crew members dead or wounded. Rose survived Sankt Vith. His Jackson took 2 hits from German 75mm guns, both deflected by the frontal armor. The M36's sloped glacis plate was effectively 140mm thick when hit at angle. German guns struggled to penetrate it beyond 600 yards. But the open-topped turret was vulnerable to artillery airbursts and plunging fire. Several M36s in the battalion were knocked out by indirect fire during the week-long defense of Sankt Vith. By December 23rd, American forces had to abandon the town. German pressure was overwhelming. The 7th Armored Division conducted a fighting withdrawal westward. The 814th Tank Destroyer Battalion provided rear guard, engaging German pursuit forces at every defensible position. Rose fired his 90mm gun 43 times during the withdrawal, all at ranges under 1,000 yards, all at targets he could see clearly through his telescopic sight. The contrast with his December 1st engagement was absolute. At Beeck, he'd had time to calculate, time to range his shots, time to methodically engage a target that didn't know it was being hunted. At Sankt Vith and during the withdrawal, combat happened at reflex speed. See target, identify target, fire. No ranging shots, no careful calculations, just the desperate mathematics of kill or be killed armor warfare. Rose would never forget the Panther burning on that distant highway at 4,600 yards. But the shots that kept him alive through the Bulge were the ones he made at point-blank range against tanks that were shooting back. The 814th Tank Destroyer Battalion spent January 1945 reconstituting after the Bulge. The battalion had lost 19 M36 Jacksons during the German offensive, 26 crew members killed, 41 wounded. Replacement vehicles arrived from depot stocks in France. Replacement crews came straight from training facilities in the United States. Most had never fired a 90mm gun in combat. Rose found himself training the new gunners, teaching them the M76F telescopic sight, explaining how to estimate range, how to lead moving targets, how to adjust for wind and elevation. The new crews asked about his 4,600-yard shot. Rose told them to forget it. That kind of engagement happened once in a war. What they needed to learn was how to kill Panthers at 500 yards while under fire. That was the skill that kept tank destroyer crews alive. By February, the battalion was back in action. American forces were pushing toward the Rhine River. German resistance was collapsing, but remained fierce at key defensive positions. Panthers and King Tigers still appeared wherever the Wehrmacht tried to hold ground. The M36 Jackson remained the most effective American answer to German heavy armor. Its 90mm gun could penetrate any German tank from the front at normal combat ranges. Rose participated in the Rhine crossing operations in March. His Jackson was part of the support element for the 9th Army's assault near Wesel. German forces on the East Bank included elements of 3 panzer divisions. The fighting was intense, but brief. American air superiority and overwhelming artillery support broke German defensive positions within 48 hours. Rose's company knocked out 6 Panthers and 2 King Tigers during the crossing, all at ranges under 800 yards. April brought the final push into Germany's industrial heartland. The 814th Tank Destroyer Battalion advanced through the Ruhr pocket, engaging scattered German resistance. Most German armor units had been destroyed or had run out of fuel. The Panthers and Tigers that had dominated European battlefields for 2 years were burning wrecks or abandoned hulls scattered across hundreds of miles of terrain. Rose saw his last combat action on April 23rd near the Elbe River. A single Panther appeared from a farm complex at approximately 600 yards. The German crew was attempting to retreat eastward ahead of American forces. Rose engaged with 2 rounds, both hits. The Panther burned. It was his 47th confirmed kill with the M36's 90mm gun. 46 of those kills happened at ranges under 1,000 yards. Germany surrendered on May 8th. The 814th Tank Destroyer Battalion received orders to prepare for redeployment to the Pacific Theater. The plan was to equip the battalion with newer M36 variants and use them against Japanese armor in the expected invasion of the home islands. The atomic bombs dropped in August made that invasion unnecessary. Rose never fired the 90mm gun in combat again. The after-action reports from December 1, 1944, remained in the battalion's official records. Lieutenant Alfred Rose, M36 Jackson, Panther destroyed at 4,600 yards, witnessed and verified. The shot was documented in multiple Army publications over the following decades. Military historians analyzing tank warfare cited it as evidence of the M36's capabilities. Gunnery instructors used it as an example of what was theoretically possible with proper ranging and calculation. But the shot's real significance wasn't the distance. It was what the engagement revealed about the evolution of armored warfare. The M36 Jackson represented the culmination of American tank destroyer development during the Second World War, a vehicle that could engage and destroy the most heavily armored German tanks at ranges that exceeded anything doctrine had anticipated. Rose's shot at 4,600 yards proved the weapon could perform at the absolute limits of its design specifications, and for 47 years, that record stood as the second longest tank kill in military history. The record Rose set on December 1, 1944, remained unbroken through Korea, through Vietnam, through decades of Cold War tank development and doctrine refinement. The United States Army continued improving its armored vehicle capabilities, better guns, better fire control systems, better ammunition. But no American tank crew ever documented a confirmed kill at a greater range than Rose's 4,600 yards. The British Army broke the record on February 26, 1991. A Challenger 1 main battle tank with the call sign 11B was operating in Iraq during Operation Desert Storm. The crew spotted an Iraqi tank at extreme range during the ground war to liberate Kuwait. The gunner fired a depleted uranium round using advanced fire control computers and thermal imaging systems that didn't exist in 1944. The round impacted at 5,100 yards, 3.1 miles, the longest confirmed tank versus tank kill in military history. Rose's shot fell to second place, but context matters. The Challenger crew in 1991 had laser rangefinders, ballistic computers, stabilized gun platforms, digital fire control systems that automatically calculated lead and elevation. Rose had mechanical controls, an optical sight, and 3 years of wartime experience compressed into 3 weeks. He made his shot with tools from 1944 against a target moving at maximum engagement range in combat conditions. The M36 Jackson remained in American service through the Korean War. The vehicle performed well against North Korean and Chinese armor. Its 90mm gun could penetrate any tank the Communist forces deployed, but engagement ranges in Korea were typically much shorter than in Europe. Mountain terrain and limited sightlines meant most tank battles happened at ranges under 500 yards. No gunner replicated Rose's extreme range engagement. Rose survived the war. He left active duty in 1946 and returned to civilian life. The Army tried to recruit him for gunnery instructor positions at Fort Knox, but he declined. He'd spent 3 years shooting at people. He was done. The records show he never spoke publicly about his December 1st engagement. No interviews, no memoirs, no attempts to capitalize on being part of military history. The after-action reports remained in the archives. Historians discovered them decades later while researching tank destroyer operations in Northwest Europe. The engagement at 4,600 yards appeared in several academic papers on armored warfare. Military analysts used it as a case study in the limits of direct fire engagement. The shot represented the absolute maximum effective range for Second World War-era tank guns operating under ideal conditions. If this story moved you the way it moved us, do me a favor, hit that like button. Every single like tells YouTube to show this story to more people. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We're rescuing forgotten stories from dusty archives every single day. Stories about tank destroyer gunners who saved lives with calculations and cold precision. Real people, real heroism. Drop a comment right now and tell us where you're watching from. Are you watching from the United States, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia? Our community stretches across the entire world. You're not just a viewer. You're part of keeping these memories alive. Tell us your location. Tell us if someone in your family served. Just let us know you're here. Thank you for watching. And thank you for making sure Lieutenant Alfred Rose doesn't disappear into silence. These men deserve to be remembered, and you're helping make that happen.